First of all, Johannes, thanks again for invitation here. I'm really proud to be a part of this meetup, a part of NG Heidelberg community. I see you sharing the news every time, which is pretty good. So let me start. Basically, this is the first time I do this kind of this version of this talk in English for English-speaking community. So I had a first half of it presented in NG Vikings about a year ago, but a lot of things changed since then. So I reworked it a little bit. So let's talk about some Angular bad practices. So maybe the bad is not a really good thing, but it's a catchy title. So I decided just to keep it. So about myself, yeah, my name is Valentin Kononov. I live in Minsk, Belarus. It's somewhere in between Lithuania, Poland, and Russia. And I'm a full stack developer working mostly with the TypeScript at the moment. And at the moment, I'm working really a lot with NestJS, which looks like Angular, but I had several years of just Angular experience as a front-end developer and also some other backend stuff. Apart from just day-to-day work, I'm a part of 3 local Minsk communities, 2 of them related to Angular, and I'm either try to speak there from time to time or just support some chats, just little minor things. And my most active participation is related to Minsk GDG community. You know, it's kind of regular Google developer group here in Minsk. We're doing the meetups. I'm trying to moderate meetups in the similar way as Johannes did today for some things, so writing some news and stuff like that. And my primary occupation is I'm working as a full stack developer at Mapbox company. We're doing a lot of stuff related to mapping and navigation. We use the OSM as one of the sources for our mapping. So we do also the communication and try to push some outcome back to the community to support the OpenStreetMaps community as much as we can, basically. I guess it's enough talking. You will have, at the end of the presentation, you will have all the links. You'll have the link to the talk, to the slides, and some samples, which are open source in the GitHub. So let me just start. At the moment, I suggest you just to relax a little bit for a sec, maybe close your eyes and think. Try to remember, try to imagine the last time you wanted to learn something new. So for example, for me, it might be a case when about 3 years ago, a bit more, maybe I tried to learn some new Angular 4, Angular 6, it was the times before we had even NestJS, I guess. So how we usually learn? So from my point of view, the best way to learn things is to find a real teacher, some person who is in charge, who is competent in the area and the technology you want to get in, and who is accessible to you. So you want to you can talk to him or her and just get some knowledge, get some best practices, and so on. This is important, and this is the best case scenario. But in our world, which is very fast, sometimes it's not possible. So another way, for me personally, kind of maybe even a little bit finance investment. So I go to a bookstore and buy some book about the technology. And when I'm reading it, I get some images of how the things should be done in this particular technology or in this particular framework. But book might not give you too much details about some particular cases, some practical cases. So you start to read some articles, then you just give up and open YouTube, Google some videos with some how-to guidelines, watch it. Then you need some starting point, right? So, in my case, I try to find a good template, like some template or boilerplate for Angular application, for example. And after that, I just start doing code. I have some business idea, or maybe I have some tasks in my regular work. So I get some initial startup scenarios and I start coding. What's next? Of course, when I try to add some new features with the technology which I don't super familiar right now, at the moment, I meet some bugs and issues. And what then? I go to Stack Overflow just to find the first and most popular answer for some of the issues, so how to fix it. And this is good in the sense that you can actually start doing things and you can actually deliver some results either to your customer or just to yourself if you're learning by yourself. But it's a little bit bad in a sense that you start from something which was written by someone else, and you don't know a lot about the quality of this thing, just because you are at the point when you cannot evaluate it. And it can lead to such a case when you bring some initial issues from the very beginning across the whole life cycle of your application, of your development. That was the reason I'm doing this talk, just to highlight some of the things in Angular and RxJS, and to show that some of things can be done better. And I don't expect you to learn and remember everything from this presentation. I just want to give you some sense and some words and images how things can be done better, at least on a one step further. So let's get deep into it. And first thing, I mentioned in the previous slide about a boilerplate, about some templates. But if you're working in Angular environment, you actually don't need it, because just don't forget you have Angular CLI. And you can just type ng-new, some application name, and no matter version of Angular you have, you will get the initial template of Angular application. I believe everyone knows that, because Angular is famous for it has really good templates. So you don't have it in React, for example. And with all love and respect to other frameworks, the initial setup and the things available out of the box here is pretty awesome. But if I would consider this as my main thing, I would not consider it like a best practice, because it gives you some regular settings. So they created the Angular template for this ng-new, fit for a lot of purposes, fit for a lot of backward compatibility. So you have regular TypeScript settings, regular linter settings, some default Angular compiler stuff. And it allows you to do really bad stuff like having any as a keyword in your TypeScript. So what I suggest here as a slight improvement is to use the strict option when you create the new Angular application with Angular CLI. So when I was preparing to this talk, I just compared the difference, right? And the difference is not super significant in terms of amount of settings, but the meaning of them are really important. So for example, in this slide, you see just the things which are presented in a strict template and not present in the regular template of Angular application. So in tsconfig, you see a couple of things like strict is true, no implicit returns, and some other stuff. And also you see the stuff about additional Angular compiler options for checking your template, for type checking of your template and parameters you inject and stuff like that. This is hugely important. Another change you can observe if you compare the Angular JSON, the regular one and the strict one. It also has the Angular compiler options, so it slightly duplicates stuff, and it has a strict setting for schematics. So if you're working with library and stuff, it will also help you a lot. And there are other settings for Angular compiler, not just these two, but there are actually the full list of them, about a dozen. And I will show you the link where you can observe it. I posted here a couple of interesting for me, like full template type check. I believe it's interesting, and trace, which can be useful for debug and for a better understanding of how the compiler and engine is functioning. And of course, the linter settings. So the linter setting is something which you need to correct by yourself, because of compatibility and stuff, such rules like no any will not be present by default, but it should be. Just trust me, it should be in your application. Even if you will need to have it, you have some minor backdoors. But in general, this kind of settings are really important, because we are programmers. I'm really lazy as a programmer to verify every little symbol and every row. So sometimes I can just forget about something, and sometimes WebStorm can just suggest me something. So to prevent myself from some issues, just use the linter settings and analyze it. I give you a sample. When I started a project with the two other guys for a current company in March, the first thing we did, we analyzed the current linter settings, and we get together for a meeting for a couple of hours and discussed what kind of linter settings we want, what kind of strictness we want to bring into our code and application. And after that, we started to spend less time for negotiation of that later. Another thing, apart from TSLint, which is still by default, you can already convert it to ESLint, which is also pretty cool, a little bit faster, and have also the huge amount of rules. And here in the slide, you can see the links. I really appreciate the projects like Linter that they have the list of rules. And sometimes I just go there to get inspired. And I read in the list of rules, and at some point of time, I understand, okay, I really need to use this because I usually missed this part in my code. So we're done with the linting and strict sync, but we just touch bases about any. And every time I prepare to the presentation for similar things, I try to remove the slides and try to get rid of it like I'm trying to get rid of any from my project. But I still keep doing it just to highlight how important is it. So for example, I came from .NET environment. And for me, the first years of JavaScript was such horrible. I just cannot get into it because my head is functioning like a compiler. So I write something, I need to have some verification, some check. And JavaScript didn't have abilities to it. And just when I started to work with Angular and with TypeScript, I finally get it. But there is a backdoor, which is any. And let's see a sample. So for example, you have any. Like here in row 8, you have some function which shows some notification. And it receives any as a parameter. And for example, you show a notification for the movie with the name Game of Thrones. Pretty fancy, pretty nice, everything is fine. But then, at some point of time, you understand, during the refactoring, of course, that the word name is not correct to represent the title of a movie. And you change it. And you know what? You don't see any error. The only thing you will notice in a couple of weeks, somewhere in application, you will see the string with undefined in the message. And that's it. Nothing else happening. So it will be cached by a QA guys or maybe by a customer. And it's such easy to prevent such a mistakes just by introducing an interface. And if you mess up with interface name, you will see the compiler with error right now before you even run an application. So when we work with the TypeScript, we really should use the benefits of it. And I'm trying to have this no any rule everywhere. But you know what? Every rule has our own exceptions. And any is not exception here. So for example, if you write some generic decorator in Angular, for example, or maybe even in some backend for NestJS, you can have an option that you expect anything. So that could be a case when you have any, but still you have another thing which is pretty good, which is unknown, and it's a little bit better than any. Like you cannot use unknown before you cast it to someone else. And tests, logging, this is also acceptable cases for any. Or for example, recently we faced a case when we needed to hack some third-party library. That library was written in TypeScript. And we needed to update some property, but we didn't have access to it because it was marked with private in TypeScript. So for this particular case, which is not super, I accept, but we really need it. So we hacked it with wrapping it as any. So this is one of the potential cases when any is legal, but please know everywhere. And to prevent yourself from such kind of mistakes, there is a simple no any rule in Linter. So once again, make your code happy, make your compiler happy, and make yourself happy that you don't put some really easy issues. But okay, we're done with that. Whew. And we can talk about real things. So I really hope that the first part of these slides, like first 5 or maybe even 6 slides, are familiar to you. And if it is, just let me know in our chat. So remember, we have YouTube chat and we have chat and Zoom. So if you know all these things, just put some sign. Okay, it's familiar. You didn't need to show us all that. But if you find something new, tell us what was new. So we will just do some little tiny research. So come on. The primary purpose of nearly every application, is it web or desktop, is getting some data, some visualization of data, and some data modification. So in Angular, to receive something and show it, you need to subscribe it. So because nearly everything in Angular is observable thing. So like HTTP server, it's observable. Something you get from other pieces of application is usually observable. So you need to subscribe. And this is a sample, really small and understandable sample of component which subscribes to some changes and do something with the result, which doesn't matter. It looks okay, but it's extremely bad because it's just a direct way to a huge memory leak, because it doesn't have unsubscription. And when you navigated to that component, it subscribed to some observable, started to listen it. You navigated back, component got destroyed, but you still have subscription. If you navigated in once again, you have two subscriptions, which will be present until you reload the tab. So that's a pretty famous problem, and it has a bunch of decisions. So when I faced it for the first time several years ago, I literally tried every of solutions. So I will remind you some of them. So this one doesn't work because it's memory leak, and it doesn't work with push. For example, when you receive some update from observable, nothing changed. You need to control how the component is rendered by yourself. So you need to trigger it, which is not good in Angular because you don't want to mess with change detection. The next thing, okay, really straightforward. If we didn't have unsubscribe, okay, let's save our subscription and do manual unsubscribe. And this solution works pretty cool. No memory leaks, it's fine, but still it doesn't work with push, so you need to handle it by yourself, and it's a lot of manual work. So I imagine the hundreds of, maybe even thousands of places in a big application when you need to get some data, and you don't want to do this manually. So when I faced it first time, the colleague of mine suggested me to use take while operator, which is famous in RxJS. So the idea is pretty simple. Angular component should know somehow and that it's alive or it's not alive. And the usual practice to have just a Boolean variable that it's alive and set it to false when it's destroyed. And when you subscribe to data, you just use take while operator, like here in row number 6, and you put there some mechanism to understand, is you still waiting for some values or not? And it looks okay. But if we take a look to the log, how it works, so you see that word check. Check means that we tested the subscription. And even after the component destroyed, we still did one more check. It means that this solution doesn't solve the memory leak for 100%. Even after the component is destroyed, you still have something, some memory allocated, some process ticket. So the better improvement of it, another RxJS operator, take until, which have the same idea, but instead of post check that that component is alive, we add the other subject, which we control by ourselves. And when we do a destroy of component, we trigger the subject, and it lets know RxJS to close all the subscriptions, to unsubscribe. So really, this thing works in every sense, but there are a couple of things. First of all, you should not mess around with the end of this take until. And if you work with Angular a lot, I believe you've seen the pipelines of RxJS with the 5, 6, or maybe even more RxJS operators. And if take until is not the last one, it doesn't work. So you don't want to do this. And again, it's so much code. I'm really lazy guy. And at this point of time, I need to say sorry. I'm talking so much about this thing, but finally we'll get to a point pretty close. Another improvement is a custom third-party operator, which inside does the same stuff like take until, but it's already implemented, so you don't need to do it once again. So you just install the library, you put this operator into a pipe, and that's it. And you put this as some input parameter to this operator. So this works pretty cool. The only issue it's third-party dependency. You don't know what is going on inside, and if it got updated, you can get your things broken. For some companies, you need to prove that you should use it. You know, it's pretty a mess. And finally, we got to my point. So all this long road was just to introduce the async pipe. And I really believe that you know that. And but still, there are places, maybe some legacy code, maybe some custom things. Maybe you write the code which is not even a component, where you use some other subscriptions. So you should know the previous stuff. But what you should use, of course, you should use async pipe. And here is the beautiness of that. So you have some service, you have some function which gets you observable. You can put it right inside your template and put the pipe, which is called async. And Angular will take all the things like to track the subscriptions for itself. It's pretty cool. You from this point, you don't have responsibility to unsubscribe. And the best thing is that it works with on push. So if the observable will deliver you a new value, the Angular will update the component. The render will happen once again, and you will see everything is working. But one thing you should know, that this will happen every time when observable emits a value, even if the value is completely the same. So if it's timer, or I don't know, maybe you got the updates and the update is really heavy, but it's the same, you need to take care about somehow by yourself. So another thing, I looked at this template, and for the first glance, it looks good to me. But I understand that it's direct reference to some function, to some service in my template. What if I need it in several times, in several places? So as you cannot do it as is. So you need to trick it somehow. For example, you can save the link of that observable to some reference inside your component, like here in row number 8. So you can have a variable which is observable, and on component initialization, you can just put there the result of that observable. So I mean, not the result, the link to that observable, and use it in a component. So from this point, you receive the ability to work with it in a TypeScript code, which is cool because you might have some additional checks, or maybe something else, and maybe some performance counters, I don't know. And you can use it several times in a template. And it works. So no memory leaks, on push working fine. But again, to use it in several places, if you will use it in several places, you will have several subscriptions, and you will have much more time, much more triggers of your observable. So in most cases, it's not what you want. But let's think how you can use the one, or maybe even several observables as one object in a template. There is a really simple trick. So you can wrap around some template code with ngIf, and inside if you can put the construction like this. So you can put async pipes as in pieces of object, and put an alias there, and use this like here in template rows 5 and 6 in several places. It's nice, but again, ngIf, the scope, so the component looks somewhat little bit ugly to me. The solution, again, the presentation is like step by step by step by step, but still finally get to a point. The solution is to save the result of your observable to different variables, so that your template gets cleaner. And you can do it just on initialization. You can put the value, or maybe even result of mapping of observable value to some variable, like here, ID and count, and use it wherever you want. The only issue, as I mentioned, this example has 2 subscriptions for one observable, so the amount of triggers will double. So you will have some, not a memory, but still some leak. So some code execution will happen much more time than you expected it to be. And here we come to a really interesting and really good thing in RxJS, which we tried with some guys in a project several times, and it's working fine. And I'm talking about the share operator for RxJS. So if you really want to use your observable several times, use the result of your observable several times without introduction of too much subscribers, without of that CPU leaking somewhere, you use share pipe. And you can imagine such a practical case. For example, you have some a big page with a filter component as a sidebar. Like you write, for example, the electronic store where you can sell the smartphones or something like that. And you have the huge filter with tons of settings for the smartphones, like size, the CPU amount, of course, the color, anything you can imagine. And you need to update several other components upon the change of the filter. So you have the table, you have the counter, you have, I don't know, some notifications like someone just bought this smartphone which is satisfies your filter criteria, like several consumers of that. So for this purpose, we use the share pipe, and it works exactly like it's present in this slide. So the only thing you need to do, you need to, when you save the variable of observable to some other place, you put the pipe and operator share, and that's it. No matter how many times you will use it later, you will still have the correct amount of subscribers and correct amount of the triggers. So that's pretty good. I wonder how it happens. And the cool thing that RxJS do for you, internally, it creates the intermediate subject. So when your observable, your source observable, which is on the left here, will have just one subscriber, which is that custom intermediate subject in RxJS. And in its turn, it can have multiple subscribers, and it will have the mechanism to track the links, to track the references, so who listens to it. And if you will go to the RxJS documentation, you will find another sample, or maybe in Stack Overflow. So Stack Overflow usually advises to use either share or 2 operators, one by one. One is publish, another one ref count. And I wonder what's the difference. And basically, the mechanism is 99% the same, except one case. So the publish basically does just the creation of this intermediate subject. And the ref count starts the mechanism of counting the references to your subscribers. So just to be able to unsubscribe and release resources. And if you use the sequence of publish and ref counts, and at some point of time, you don't have subscribers anymore, like you navigated away from all the components which has that subscription, it will clear up everything and it will destroy the subject. So if you navigate to that component once again without the full reload, you will don't see data. You will not see anything coming from the source observable. And instead, if you use share pipe, it will take the subject from some subject pool, from some internal mechanism of RxJS. So even if you will navigate away and shut down all the observables, but get back, you will still have the data coming. So share is easy to use, but maybe in some particular cases, to have it more straightforward, you might use the second option. And once again, just to get the completely freaked out about the possibilities of this stuff, there is a share replay. And what the hell is that? Basically, the idea is, again, the same. So you can share the result of your observable. But in the previous case, if you come at some moment, you will not have any data right now. You will need to wait until some data will come through observable. Something will be triggered. And this guy will have some stack of n previous values. So for example, if we're talking about the filter example, and I have share replay, I will have the sequence of like 10 previous filter changes. And I can use either the last one or some of them, but I will have some data anyway. So you can find out how to set up it to have just one, and you will have some data no matter you use it. And again, you can use variants. You can use share replay, or you can use publish replay and ref count for the same purpose. But if you just use share replay without any options, it will lead to huge memory leak because it will not count references. And that's a difference which I cannot understand right now. So for share replay, you need to push inside some setting component like ref count is true, just to let it behave like looking for your references. So guys, I really hope that you're not so much bored with all that stuff. And if you want to ask some questions, just write it down to the chat or preserve it to ask it in the end of our meetup in our Q&A sessions. And we get into the final words. So finally getting out of the woods for this observable stuff, the last thing, I promise. The last thing is what happens here. This code, if you believe me, is kind of perfect in terms of how you subscribe to instances and subscribe to data and how you can use it in several places in a template. It's completely fine. But what happens if it will fail with the error from observable? Of course, yeah, you will see the error in the console, and it looks really bad, and the component will stuck. So instead, you should use the catch error, like here in the slide, which allows you to put some default value to show in case of error, and which allows you to handle error by way of your application, what you wanted it to be. So remember, if you get data from outside somewhere, you need to have the catch error. Maybe there is a way to make it possible on the global level. I didn't include it here, so it might be your homework to find out. But at least this option should be when you subscribe to some observables. You see, I just have nice log message, which will not distract the user. Okay, and I started with the strict settings with the lint, and I want to mention it once again. So in the list of lint rules, you have a lot of rules for RxJS. So like no ignored subscription, no ignored error, which is pretty cool here. And the last one, which I like a lot, is RxJS prefer Async Pipe. So it will force you to use Async Pipe instead of something else. So maybe I'm running a little bit out of time, but I will show you the last sample, which is related to the convenient regular pipes.
Don't worry. I overstressed my time, so take your time. It's absolutely fine. Don't try to stress yourself because it's 20 o'clock. You have some couple of minutes.
It's okay. I don't like the long talks anyway, so I'm trying to do mine kind of concentrated. So it is the last sample, which I plan to show you today. So, okay, let's take a look. Imagine the case you have the list of values, you have the entry-for cycle in a template, and but you cannot show just a property of your object. You need to handle it somehow. So for example, you need to put it to correct string, or maybe you need to even get some additional values outside to fill it here. So the straightforward way is to use the function, which is extremely bad stuff because, you will have it be called so much times. For example, in this example, I have a sorting, and when I click the sort button, which simply changes the order of a list, I will have this function called every time for every sorting, but the object is still the same. Nothing's changed, but function will be called. So the convenient way is, I believe you know it. The convenient way is to create a pipe, which is Angular core thing. So you just create class which implements the pipe transform interface, and there is one single method transform. So you return what you need, and you use pipe in the same way as Async Pipe. And Angular tells us that everything which goes through pipe goes through a cache. So it will not be called too much times. Let's check it. OK, I have some console log in pipe, and right now it looks good. So I have the calls for each different value in my list. And after that, when I can click forever for sorting, but I will not have another console log. So the Angular will cache pipe result by itself. But let's change our sample a little bit. Like, let's go nerdy, right? So imagine the scenario: you have some list of values, and for some value, in some way they're not super unique. So for example, here I have the movies, and I have the Big Bang Theory twice because it's a different seasons, but the parent ID, the name of the series or something, or maybe the creator is the same. And I want to have a pipe which will get some information related to this ID. So in the first iteration, when this list will be rendered for the first time, I will need to get these things twice for this parent ID. And I expect the Angular to cache it. But no, for the first time, before any change detection trigger, the Angular will still call the pipe. So if we have the pipe which is triggered during the first run several times, it will be triggered several times. And it's a kind of official thing. So it's nothing to super worry about, except you have the huge list of, I don't know, 10,000 of values. Half of them are similar, and you don't want to just so much CPU arrange for simple stuff. You might think about the caching. So I don't suggest any particular solutions right now, but you can try to dig and find out some talks by Minsk, he and Igor Minal as well. So they mentioned some memoization techniques in Angular for such scenarios. But I just wanted you to know that even the cached standard Angular pipe might be triggered several times if this is the first run before any change detection happens. Whew. So I guess we are coming to an end. So in this slide, you see the links. The first link is a link to this particular slide in case you might want to have some samples of it. Now, just to list it around and see how it was looking like. And the last link is the link to all the samples I have here. So there is a small Angular application, open source in GitHub by my name. And you can open it, download, and see the code for each example I have here in presentation. And in the middle, you have my site with some articles, not just about Angular, but some of them are recipes for some particular stuff. So you might be interested. And then we come to a conclusion. So I started with a speech about how good it is to have the strict settings for the TypeScript and how good it is to avoid any. And I really mean it. It's something which I'm struggling personally a lot. So I really encourage you to avoid usage of any in any TypeScript code and have some lint settings to help yourself in that mission. I really encourage you to use async pipes and use share in case if you want to divide the usage of your observable to several times, to several places. And every time you wanted to do some modification or you wanted to have some calls outside of your template, create a standard pipe for it. Don't call a function. Create a pipe, even if the code inside might be somewhat complicated. And the final and the most important thing, enjoy what you're doing. Enjoy the coding and enjoy having a good code and having the good working application. So it's hello from my dog who is running around right now outside. And thank you so much. Johannes, your turn.